the model of agrarian classes in India by D N Dhanagare. Welcome students. Last module we have discussed about the views of Daniel Donner regarding agrarian structure in India. Now we are going to discuss about the model of agrarian classes in India by D N Dhanagare. India is a predominantly agriculture based society and has a distinctly organized agrarian class structure. Basically speaking, human settlements can be classified as cities, towns and villages. The agrarian class structure is characteristic of the village or rural society. It is a classification based on the dominant economic activity of the people and agriculture. The agrarian class structure in India is the result of economic and social forces acting together. The approximate population shares of each class as given by R. Desai shows that 20% belong to non-agriculturists, 22% are landowners, 27% are tenants and 31% are belonged to agricultural laborers approximately. In this agrarian class structure, about 60% of the cultivators are marginal cultivators who cultivates less than 2 hectares of land. The small cultivators who work 2 to 5 hectares of land are around 16%. The medium cultivators with 5 to 10 hectares of land are 6% and big cultivators with more than 10 hectares of land are about 18%. The agrarian class structure has certain relations that are formed due to the causes enforced by law, customary of traditional and fluctuating in character. But Daniel Donner did not agree with the thesis of 3 agriculturist classes in the agrarian class structure of India. So, Donner came forth with the 3 terms of analyze the dynamics of agrarian class structure. They were Malik, Kishan and Mastur. The agrarian class structure in India has certain relationships among the different classes. This has been the result of years of social customs and sometimes due to the enforcement of the law. For example, the landowners and rich peasants control an inordinately large amount of economic resources in the villages. So, they are able to have a lot of power over small and poor peasants and the landless laborers. This has caused the 2 classes to have bitter relations. The rich landed classes of the village have a lot of political, social and economic mileage. On the other hand, the poor of the village barely exercise any control over their economic or social conditions. In this lesson, we will be discussing on Daniel Donner's work on agrarian classes, comprehensive model of agrarian classes developed by D N Dhanagare, social composition of agrarian classes in India. The agrarian social structure varies from one region to another. The relations among classes and social composition of groups that occupy the specific class positions in relation to land control and land use pattern in India. The land use pattern so diverse and multifaceted that it is difficult to incorporate them all in a general scheme. Hence, an attempt is made to set out a feasible conceptual model that would enable us to diverse sets of social groups and compare them in order to arrive at broader empirical generalizations of some theoretical relevance. Daniel Donner's work on agrarian classes. In spite of the diversity of social arrangement on land in different parts of India, Daniel Donner has attempted to reduce them into well defined and precise social categories on the basis of the 3 following criteria. 1. Type of income obtained from the soil, that is A. rent, B. fruits of own cultivation or C. wages. 2. The nature of rights, A. ownership, tenancy with varying degree of tenurial security, C. sharecropping rights or D. no rights at all. 3. The extent of field work actually performed. absentee who does not work at all, and those who perform partial work. See total work done by actual cultivator with family labor and where work is done entirely for the others to earn wages. Taking these criteria, Toner has outlined the following model of agrarian class structure in India. 1. Malik whose income is derived primarily from property rights in the soil and whose common interest is to keep the level of rents up while keeping the wage level down. They collect rents from tenants, subtenants and sharecroppers. A. Big landlords holding rights over large tracts extending over several villages. They are absentee or owner or rentees with absolutely no interest in land management or improvement. B. Rich landowners, proprietors with considerable holdings, but usually in the same village and although performing no field work, supervising cultivation and taking personal interest in the management and also in the improvement of land if necessary. 2. Kisans, working persons having property interest in the land, but actual rights whether legal or customary inferior to those of the Maliks. A. Small landowners having holdings sufficient to support a fairly who cultivate land with family labor and who do not either employ outside labor except in harvest or receive rent. B. Substantial tenants, tenants holding leases under either first A or first B, tenurial rights fairly secure, size of the holding usually above the sufficiently level, the rest is as second A. 3. Mazdoors, those earning their livelihood primarily from working on others' land or plots. A. Poor tenants having tenancy rights but less secure, holdings too small to sufficient for a family's maintenance and income derived from land often less than that earned by wage labor. B. Sharecroppers, either tenants at will, leases out security, cultivating land for others on sharecropper basis and having at least agricultural implements. C. Landless labourers, donors, their major categories designated by the current Indian vernacular terms are based on the relations of production or are in relation to the means of production and in this sense represent a Marxian model of agrarian classes, although Toner himself does not specify the theoretical assumptions underlying the model. While Toner's subcategories are nearer the realities of Indian agrarian social structure, he does not relate the specificity of the internal differentiations within Indian agrarian society to broader and more widely used conceptual models in contemporary sociology. Therefore, a need to readjust or regroup Toner's subcategories into such a broader and more comprehensive model and redesignated them by more commonly used concepts and criteria in the study of peasant societies. Such a model can be drawn from the works of Lenin and Mao, especially those relating to analysis of agrarian classes in the Russian and Chinese societies respectively. Comprehensive model of agrarian classes developed by D N Dhanagare. 1. Landlords. This class broadly subsumes Toner's first A, that is rent. Second, rich peasants, second A, that is ownership, who have substantial holdings, enjoy secured occupancy rights and have to pay a nominal rent to their landlord. Then middle peasants, tenants who have substantial holdings but have to pay higher rent than those paid by tenant. Poor peasants, landowners with holdings that are not sufficient to maintain a family and therefore forced to rent others' land. Toner does not account for this class. Final one is landless labourers, They are total work done by their own family labours. With using this model of agrarian classes in the Indian context, some caution is necessary. First, all the 5 class situations and their subcategories are regionally specific. Secondly, more often rich, middle and poor peasant categories can be distinguished from each other only in qualitative rather than in quantitative terms. The words like substantial, medium or small that are often used to differentiate between land holdings cannot be defined with meticulousness and accuracy in terms of land, partly because of regional variations and partly because of lack of uniform data and statistics on different regions of India in different periods. What one could possibly do is take into account the comparability of relative positions of agrarian classes in different regional structures. Although the class categories of the model are analytically separable, their boundaries are sometimes unclear in reality. There is considerable overlapping between categories 3 and 4 and also between 4 and 5, but there is no satisfactory way of resolving this problem, particularly at macro level analysis. All that an analyst can do is broadly identify the class situations from which came the leaders and principal participants of the peasant movements in question. Social composition of agrarian classes in India. The social composition of these agrarian classes in terms of specific status groups like caste, religious or ethnic groups etc. is far too complex in different regions of India to reduce into any simplistic formula. Members of a status group, for example caste, often belonged to different class, while those who in terms of their relation to the means of production belonged to the same class situation came from different status groups. However, certain broad patterns are visible and social groupings that are more likely to occupy certain class position than others are generally identifiable. For example, landowners and rich landowners, including non-cultivating urban moneylenders, belonged to the upper castes such as Brahmin, Thakur or Paniya in northern India. In Andhra, Kammas, Reddis and Raus. In Mysore, the Okaligas and Lingayats. The Patidas in Gujarat region, while Kunbi, Matas and Tesmukats in Maharashtra would be cited as more example of the locally dominant landowning caste. At the village level, these landowning classes often only formed a small center. The middle and poor peasantry, mostly debt ridden, came primarily from the traditional caste of cultivators, artisans and so on. The landless labourers belonged to mostly to untouchable castes, the Harijans. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, the great bulk or agricultural workers was and is even now recruited from the untouchable Chamas, the most populous caste there. All the same, members of a single caste or religious or tribal community could be found spread vertically, some owning patches of land here and there, others holding tenures either permanent or year to year leases, and still others working as unattached farm labourers. This vertical spread was, however, more likely to appear in the upper than in the lower caste, although it was not totally absent even in the case of some lower castes traditionally engaged in cultivation and craftsmanship. Such a vertical spread often ensured that peasant classes found developed class awareness hard to come by, thus coexistence of agrarian classes and status groups of a non-economic nature is the most fundamental fact about the Indian agrarian social structure to be reckoned with. The status groups bound by an essentially non-economic sentiment or identity and frequently served to sustain subjugation and exploitation of those in the lower strata. In India, these structural linkages and anchorages tended to maintain the status quo, to keep the festering discontent and conflicting class interested within the boiling point, and to prevent the struggle for economic and political power from assuming a revolutionary form of, but not always. Whenever the exploited sections of the peasantry felt that they are being unjustly treated, deprived or oppressed, they did explode and resist whenever conditions were favorable. Summary. Dear students, this presentation we had discussed regarding the composition and relations of agrarian classes, Daniel Donner's views on agrarian classes. Further, we discussed about the comprehensive model of agrarian classes developed by D N Dhanagare, like landlords, rich peasants, middle peasants, poor peasants and landless labourers. The middle and poor peasantry, mostly debt ridden, came primarily from the traditional caste of cultivators, artisans and so on. The landless labourers belonged mostly to untouchable castes, the Harijans. The exploited sections of the peasantry felt that they were being unjustly deprived or oppressed. They did explode and resist whenever conditions were favorable to them. Thank you.